Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Lindsay, and I know this video is super late and I was thinking of whether to still post it or not because a lot of things have happened in my personal life that kinda had changed a couple things, and it resulted in this video being extremely late. But I actually didn't want to be bogged down with the idea of having to be justified to upload certain things due to certain time frames. So I still wanted to put my video out to you guys, one because I really loved how it all looks, but also because I still feel like it's relevant for the month. I mean, we are still in March, and it is a March plan with me, so it's still pretty okay to upload it, but I wanted to really show you guys pretty much what my theme is. And every time when I think about March, I always go back to my March plan with me of last year, just because I feel like I've always advocated the fact that I love that theme. Like, that theme is me, and I am that theme. Pretty much. And if you're curious as to what I did last year I ended up doing a Studio Ghibli theme, which was My Neighbor Totoro, and this time around I wanted to kind of do the same thing but with a different movie. And of course this is going to be a cult classic, but this is going to be Howls Moving Castle with some vintage sewing aesthetics. And the reason why I wanted to do that was because I've been really wanting to do both themes, but didn't think I had enough components or enough elements to be able to kind of put it all together into one theme that made sense. So I ended up pretty much bringing the best of both worlds, and this is what kind of came out of it. So I actually paired it with a neutral color palette just because neutrals are just my comfort zone. They work with anything, to be quite honest. And this time around I did a couple of different things. So the first thing was that I implemented a little bit more color besides the browns, the beiges, the neutrals, all that good stuff. I ended up incorporating different shades of brown, pink, green, and this like weird green color that I actually colored Sophie's dress in. And it all works because all these colors are the same tone, which is cool tone. So it kind of makes it make sense. And the other big thing that I ended up doing differently was that I actually incorporated like full colored elements into my design. And if you know me, for the longest I've always just did little snippets of color here and there, just because I'm always so scared of fully committing to fully coloring things out, because I am always afraid that it will look like an adult coloring book. And I did have a really bad experience with one theme that I did like maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and I colored it completely and it looks so bad in my opinion. So it literally traumatized me to where I have stayed away from it. But this time around I wanted to be different and incorporate some aspects of fully colored characters and other elements that are just visibly colored here and there to give little snippets of the tones, but not fully going in depth with it. So I kind of kept everything very simple because of the focal points of, for example, like Sophie's fully colored, and that just draws your eye. So I didn't want anything else contrasting with that, and I just kept all the elements very simple. And with it being simple, I actually didn't know whether I wanted to do like scripted lettering for the title of the month, or if I wanted to do like my rubber stamps. But because the whole point of my theme is more of a collective aesthetic, meaning I'm incorporating like aspects of cottagecore, sewing, vintage sewing, and Howls Moving Castle, that I just didn't want it to be too much. So I ended up just keeping everything very simple in terms of the legibility and the readability of my titles. So that's why I kind of opted for the rubber stamps. Now, if you're wondering why I kind of pair these two things together, is because With Howls Moving Castle, the one thing I really liked was the fact that they played a lot in terms of color. Like, there was a lot of color going on in a good way that I didn't want to basically do a disservice to it. But also, I remember that like in Howl's room when he was sleeping, that there was just so many different elements, like so many different fabrics, textures, colors, material, all that stuff. So I was like, listen, that makes sense for a sewing theme, and that's pretty much what kind of got it going. Now, because I ended up having this creative itch to just go draw heavy, I had to be very careful on how I wanted to present it. So if you're wondering, okay, Lindsay, like, what does that mean? Well, my friends, I ended up making my calendar super simple. I made it more of the focal point in the center of the page, but I actually kept everything very simple in terms of I used a gray marker and I just did rubber stamps. That's it. Nothing fancy schmancy, because the border of the calendar itself is going to be doodle heavy, and I honestly was nervous just because I didn't want it to look again like an adult coloring book, but I ended up doing certain techniques that made everything at the end of it all come together. Now, if you're wondering what those things are, the big thing I probably would say out of my own personal experience is keeping a very cohesive color palette. If you start incorporating different colors, it's gonna look too messy and it's gonna look like there's too much going on visually and conceptually. So I ended up sticking with the neutral palettes and just kind of alternated the colors in terms of like the yarn is gonna be brown, but then again, the brown could also be found on the picture frames. It's just different placements of colors, but still keeping the color palette true to what it is. And the whole idea with all this like imagery going on was because I really wanted the calendar page to feel like you're in the room. And the room I was envisioning was more of like a cottage style theme, because I really got a lot of inspiration from Pinterest. Like, if you guys know me, I am a huge #1 advocate for Pinterest when it comes to looking for inspirations, because girl, I'll be honest, I don't have the muscle memory to literally figure out where everything is gonna go, certain placements, textures, line work. I'm not that great. So I kind of looked at different inspirations to help devise how things are gonna look. So I'll be honest, I think I put into the search bar like vintage sewing room, and this is pretty much like what came up. So I just grabbed different things from different photos and kind of compiled it to my own rendition. And then I wanted to create a bigger focal point towards like the bottom of the page, which is going to be the scarecrow trying to like dress a mannequin. So I really wanted these characters to come to life, because I want them to kind of have their own personality and live beyond the realms of the movie. So that's pretty much like what my envisionment was. And another thing that kind of helped make this process a bit more easier in terms of putting everything together was that I actually did not use my brush pen this time. I know, shocker. I actually ended up using my Micron pens, and I've only used 2 for this whole layout. So pretty much I use the 02, which is like my all-time favorite. I actually have bought like packets specifically of that nib size just because it's just the perfect thickness for my lines. It's not too thick, not too thin. But then when it came to the finer details, I actually ended up using a 005. And the reason why is because it actually helps create a little bit more of a delicateness to certain elements of the design itself. So for example, I use it a lot when it came to the little squiggles around the picture frame. It gave the illusion that it is more curved, it has some depths, ridges, and it gives a little bit more feeling to the overall presentation of the doodle itself. but also when you compare the nib size of a 005 to an 02, it is definitely different, and it gives enough visual contrast that it just makes the whole entire piece engaging, which I really love. But yeah, I ended up doing that in black ink just because I didn't really have one of the pens in the sepia tone, but also thinking back on it, if I did do the sepia tone, maybe it could have been too muddied with all the brown tones going on. So I do like the black in this case. But yeah, that's pretty much like my whole idea into like why I ended up doing this theme. Now, to kind of talk about the elephant in the room as to why this video is so late, is a couple of things. So I ended up doing a graphic design course the last 8 weeks, and I think I did tell you guys that I am back in college, but I don't think I explained like what for. So yeah, I am in college for graphic design, and this time around, like, the class just takes a lot out of me mentally, energy wise, and time wise. And so it just kind of pushed things really back in terms of my scheduling, but also my work schedule has changed. I'm working a lot more, and I usually would have like Sundays off, which would be the days I would dedicate for editing and hopefully uploading my video. But now that I work Sundays, it kind of has pushed things back. And even though those things are not super major into why things should be pushed back so far as they are, I'm an ADHD girly, and sometimes routine is nice because it keeps us progressive and it keeps us on task. But when that routine is like thrown out the window, it's chaotic. I tell you, it's like utterly chaotic. So I'm still trying to figure out what would be like the best way to kind of get my things down. But I'm trying to be a little bit more softer with myself in terms of, you know, not being so hard on fitting to a particular schedule. I think at this moment in time, I'm just more focused on putting content out there for you guys, but also I really love the community that we have. We talk about drawing, we talk about organizing, hence bullet journaling, but also there are some of you who really do love like pulp culture in terms of movies, animes, color schemes. Like, I really love neutrals, and I am surprised that a lot of people like neutrals too. Sometimes neutrals can be deemed as boring, but it's just a great way to incorporate into like your personal clothing style. So yeah, that's pretty much why I still wanted to upload this video. But because I went on a tangent, I want to kind of go back to what I'm doing in the video. So I'm pretty much doing my habit tracker in my playlist spread, and I wanted to do something a bit different and give a different type of focal point compared to what I've done in the past. So I ended up doing a work desk with all these like sewing elements like scissors, buttons, thread, all that good stuff. I have poor little Calcifer, I think I'm pronouncing his name wrong, in a little glass jar, and I kind of played with the joke that like he's a lit flame. You don't want lit flames on your table, especially when it's wooden. So it's just something that gives a little bit more personality to the doodle itself. But because there's so much going on visually with all the doodles, I decided not to fully color him in and just only give certain aspects of color here and there to indicate that there is color. But yeah, I don't know if you guys noticed the little oopsie that I just did here. I ended up going fully tunnel focused in what I was doing and didn't realize that I was doing habit tracker boxes under my playlist spread. I know, what is wrong with me? But thankfully I was able to catch it when I was trying to create a new header, and I just ultimately was so shocked and disappointed because I'll be honest, I know there's certain things I look over, but girl, it's a whole header. How do you mess that up? But thankfully I ended up just being able to peel it off. However, the glue that I did use was actually stronger than I anticipated because it ripped the paper. and I was literally holding my breath. It was like heart surgery. I didn't want to ruin it because I already pre-sketched everything for my weekly spread on the page after, but thankfully it all worked out and I ended up being able to just paste it on the other side. But if you've also noticed, there are no cover albums, and that is because I'm still trying to figure out my printer situation. So here we go on another tangent. I hope you guys know the joke that they make of millennials, meaning that we always get super anxious when it comes to being in social settings. We don't like talking to people, and we always call our moms when it comes to making appointments for us. So this time around, me and my boyfriend went basically printer hunting, and when I went to like Best Buy to find it, I was very overwhelmed because I felt stupid talking to the associate about like, hey, can you help me like with printers? And then he just went on a whole thing of like, well, do you want an inkjet printer? Do you want a laser printer? There's printers where you have to like put the bottle of ink or all this other stuff, and I'm like, I just need a printer. So I ended up not getting anything over there because I was just too overwhelmed, and then me and my boyfriend went to Target and found a better price printer. But as we were walking down the toy aisle trying to go from like electronics to the front of the store to pay for the printer, the box broke and just fell on the floor. And that's when my boyfriend was like, was this already like used and returned? Because if that's the case, I think this is a sign not to get it if it just ultimately fell out of my hands. So yeah, that's my story as to why we don't have a printer, because we just took it as a sign to like, let's go home and research more about it. So yeah, now that you kind of figured out what's been kind of going on, here we are with our final spread, which is the weekly spread. I kept it simple because I knew going into this that I wanted to have the baddie himself, Howl, and I opted to have him with his gold hair, like his blonde hair, versus him with black hair, just because the blonde hair just worked better visually with the color palette. But also this took a lot of time for me to do because there are certain parts where I put a lot of detail into it and certain parts that I just kind of gave up. And one of them was the hat. The hat looked so bad compared to everything else because at this point I was immensely exhausted and I was just more of trying to like make it to the finish line. I do like how it looks, I'll be honest, like the shading and stuff really brought it back some life, but I was just having a lot of trouble with this drawing just because the one thing that I'm not really good at is drawing hands, and the hand that's holding the sewing needle took forever. Like I honestly had to take a picture of my own hand, almost like impersonating like holding a sewing needle. It was a lot just for that little drawing. So yeah, I was immensely fried at that point and just was on autopilot, but I loved how it came out. Again, like the colors that I used was very warm tone but neutrals, and for the skin tone I ended up using color pencils. I actually forgot to mention that, just because I didn't want to use markers. I felt like it would just bleed through and look too muddy, so I ended up using the color pencils that I have on hand, and I loved how it all turned out. But yeah, I really loved how everything turned out. Again, I'm so sorry that this took really long, but I wanted to show you guys my theme for March, and I do plan on having my April plan with me coming out really soon. It's probably going to be a bit simpler than this one, but you would just have to stay tuned for that. So until next time, my friends, bye!